What's happening, everybody? It's a live edition of Syracuse Sports presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe, and we are hopping on here on this Sunday afternoon. Hope you're having a lovely Sunday, by the way, as we have some breaking news from the Syracuse football world. Unfortunately, the worst fears for starting quarterback Steve Angeli's injury has been realized, has been reported by Pete Thamel of ESPN, that an MRI revealed that Steve Angeli tore his Achilles in Syracuse's win at Clemson yesterday. He does expect to have 2 more years of eligibility and expects to qualify for a medical redshirt this season. So some interesting notes there that we'll discuss in that injury, but I think most people speculated that's what the injury was. You know, I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast, but people that have seen that injury before, I've seen that injury before in football and in other sports. It seemed to be going down that way, but Pete Thamel reporting that an MRI today did in fact confirm that Angeli will be out for the year. It is a torn Achilles. And now you get into the recovery time from that, what his future holds there. As noted, he's going to apply for a medical redshirt. So it appears that Steve Angeli's in it for the long haul and wants 2 more years of eligibility here at Syracuse. But a lot of questions come to mind, of course. So Rickie Collins is now the starting quarterback, and who slides into QB2? And that's been an interesting competition to watch at QB3 prior to that, but now everybody shifts up the ladder a little bit. Rickie Collins is your starting quarterback, and now who is QB2? So I just wanted to hop on and go over some of those things. A couple other notes on this Sunday as well that we'll get to on the Syracuse football note, but that news just coming out within the hour via Pete Thamel of ESPN that it is now confirmed, according to his report, and Pete Thamel's usually right about these things, that Steve Angeli is out for the year. So a few immediate thoughts. First of all, we send our best to Steve Angeli. That just absolutely stinks. It's the reality of sports. Achilles injuries are always looming. There's really no rhyme or reason for it. That can happen to anybody at any time. You step wrong, it can happen. We see it in basketball all the time. We see it in a lot of different sports. It's just that looming monster that is out there. So you feel awful for Angeli. He transfers in from Notre Dame. He wins the quarterback competition with Rickie Collins in training camp and was out there, enters Saturday's game against Clemson as the leading passer in the country. So 2 years in a row, Syracuse can claim to have the leading passer in the country, of course, with Kyle McCord's record-setting season of a year ago. Angeli, third quarter, about 3 minutes to go. He's rolling to his right, non-contact, steps wrong, goes immediately down, had to be helped off the field. He was on crutches. You could see Fran Brown, my colleague Jamont Edmonds, had some good video of this that's up on his Twitter feed, consoling Steve, telling him he loves him. Now, what Fran Brown said last night, and this was the information they had at the time, that he'd be out for weeks, but now we know that he's out for the year and what the actual injury is. And now you go into the recovery time of an Achilles injury, which can take up to a year. Now, they've made a lot of advancements in technology and medical technology and how these things are done. We should consult our friends at Krause Health to get an expert opinion on that. But it's a long process. It's a process recovering from an injury that can test your patience. It's a long rehab. It's a slow, steady rehab that is going to test Steve Angeli's patience. But we send the best to him. Stinks. But listen, this is why you invest in the quarterback position, particularly in the portal era. And by the way, I noted this on our postgame pod last night, but it bears repeating. I've said this a bunch of times. Only 2 quarterbacks in the last 13 years have gone wire to wire for Syracuse football without having to be replaced either by injury or performance, right? Ryan Nassib in 2012 went wire to wire in that season, did not have to come out of a game either by performance or injury. And Kyle McCord last year. McCord had this amazing record-setting season and never left a game due to injury or performance. He got, I think there was a little bit of garbage time in like one game, but not as much as you would think, considering the numbers that Kyle McCord put up last year, right? Every other year, there's been an injury, there's been a quarterback that's come in due to performance. You've got to invest in your quarterback room. And now we're in the portal era where you're literally investing. Syracuse brought in Rickie Collins, and, you know, kind of the going rate with quarterbacks these days is somewhere between like $500,000 and $1 million if you're a starting QB1. They brought in Collins. He won the job out of the spring, but with this scenario in mind, that if QB1 goes down, what do you do? they kept their eyes open for a quarterback. Fran Brown noting in interviews over the summer that he was really impressed by what Steve Angeli did in the college football playoff for Notre Dame. Comes off the bench for Riley Leonard, leads a scoring drive for Penn State, looks good against Penn State, I should say, looks good. And it's the connections out there. Angeli, New Jersey quarterback. Nunzio Campanelli's brother is the head coach at Bergen Catholic, where Steve Angeli was. And they, you know, these recruiting circles, you stay in touch with everybody, particularly family members, right? So they had Angeli on their radar. He loses the quarterback competition at Notre Dame. Syracuse brings him in. He beats out Rickie Collins for the job. Now, what we heard all summer long, we talked about it on the pod, we reported on it. It was a close quarterback competition. But ultimately, what won Angeli the job was just he had a little more seasoning. He had composure in the pocket. He had composure in the huddle. He could read defenses. And then he comes out and he's slinging it. You put him in Jeff Nixon's offense, and he was putting up numbers. And I think this is what you've got to feel a little bit better about Rickie Collins taking over here. Now, we're going to get to some questions from our Syracuse Sports Insiders about this, but there's one in particular that I wanted to highlight here from Michael Antonio, who says this: do you think Rickie is ready to do what Angeli can do? And my answer to that is no. They're different quarterbacks, but in Jeff Nixon's system, who is proving to be one of the better offensive coordinators in college football, I think there are certainly elements of what Steve Angeli can do that Rickie Collins will do, but they're different quarterbacks. Ultimately, Angeli won the job for those qualities that I mentioned, but also he just didn't turn the ball over as much. The one thing I kept hearing about Rickie was he kept throwing more interceptions and just, you know, he's a little more raw than Steve Angeli is and has to grow into the job. Rickie is a better athlete. Steve is the better quarterback. So now the quarterback part has to grow into his game if you're Rickie Collins. Look, arm strength is not an issue with Rickie Collins. He can sling it, right? He's just got to grow into the job of composure, reading defenses, having command of the huddle. By his own admission, and I'm sure we'll talk to Rickie this week, but Rickie has said in interviews prior, he's not a take command by voice type of quarterback. He's a little more laid back. He leads by example. And those leadership qualities that he does have to evolve now. He'll get the team QB1 reps in practice. We saw him against Colgate. Didn't start well, right? Came in through that lofting interception after that game. He said he had to get some of his nerves out, but I think he recovered in that game and looked better. Had to come in the Clemson game, throws a touchdown pass to Justice Ross Simmons. And I think this is something that you've got to feel good about with Collins taking over. You've got one of the better offensive coordinators in football. You've got a strong running game. You have an offensive line that just put up its best performance of the season against a Clemson defensive line that's got 2 or 3 guys on it that have NFL grades. And I know everybody's talking about what's wrong with Clemson. That's still a really talented team that Syracuse just pushed around for 4 quarters in Death Valley on Saturday. And you have one of the deeper wide receiver rooms, not only in the ACC, but maybe proving out to be in the country. Jonte Cook had 113 yards on 6 catches yesterday. Justice Ross Simmons, we mentioned, 2 touchdowns. Darryl Gill Jr. grabs a touchdown. That is a solid wide receiver room. Add in a Jalen Hornsby. Add in an Emmanuel Ross. Add in Tyshawn Russell, who didn't play yesterday, but is in the rotation there, right? There's other guys that just can't crack the rotation right now because those 3 at the top are getting a bulk of the reps, not to mention what Dan Villari is doing at tight end right now. Oh, no, by the way, Villari can play a little quarterback. So loosen up that arm, Dan. They might need you. Hopefully not. But with the injury situation, at least you know Villari can come in and give you that element at quarterback, run some plays. And we certainly saw Dan do that a couple of years ago when Syracuse was running out of quarterbacks towards the end of that season, in which they barely got over the finish line, but did qualify for a bowl game in 2023, right? So Rickie's walking into a great situation. He's just got to play within himself, keep the mistakes to a minimum, run the offense. Now Jeff Nixon, and it's not like this is dropping out of the clear blue sky, he was his QB1 out of spring ball. There was a possibility he was going to be his QB1 out of training camp. Now you can factor in Rickie's mobility. He's certainly a much more mobile and athletic quarterback than Steve Angeli into the game plan. Where is he comfortable? Is he comfortable rolling out? And yesterday, I'll tell you what, one thing you got to note with Angeli, he had 5 passes knocked down at the line of scrimmage yesterday. So just something to keep an eye on and just something for Rickie Collins to keep in mind, right? But there's a lot that Rickie does that just has to come with experience. So you get Duke in the Dome. You got a sold-out Dome, Parents Weekend. Duke does come in as a 4-point favorite, by the way, and I think a big reason why they're favored in this game is the quarterback situation and the unknown at quarterback that's going to tilt things towards Duke a little bit. Duke has, speaking of investing in quarterbacks, one of the higher-paid quarterbacks in college football in terms of NIL and all things considered. He's making about $8 million a year, according to reports, or $8 million this year, I should say, according to reports out there. He's one of the top 3 passers in the country. So that's the shame of Angeli going down. You would have had a showdown between the guy who was leading the country in passing in Angeli and Darian Mensah, who we're talking about, who transferred to Duke from Tulane, who is one of the top 3 passers in the country as well. Duke's coming off a 45-33 win over NC State. Duke can score, but they have trouble stopping the pass. So there is opportunity for Collins to come in and, per Michael Antonio's question, not do exactly what Steve Angeli does, but he can sling it. He can throw the ball, and man, he's got some targets. This wide receiver group, I think they got mentioned again on the You Got Mossed segment on ESPN's NFL Countdown. Remember, Darryl Gill Jr. got the gloves last week from Randy Moss. There was a great video that they showed of that and how happy Darryl Gill was for that. Rickie Collins is set up here. Frankly, if Rickie Collins fails, it's on Rickie Collins because you got the coach, you got the running game with both Yasin Willis, who's healthy and back out there, had a terrific game against Clemson, the element that Will Nixon brings to that running game, and a deep, deep receiver core. I want to see the offensive line continue to have the success that they did. They played their best game by far of the season against the team you'd least expect them to on paper, but that's why they play the games, right? Incredible. So they've got to keep that up. Are they coming together as a unit and starting to get some cohesion? Because there was a lot of moving parts on that offensive line right up until the start of the season against Tennessee. Syracuse is 3-1. They're halfway to a bowl game. I think a lot of people at the beginning of the year, all things considered with the schedule, are saying to themselves, if this team gets a bowl game, I'll be happy with that. If this team can scratch out 6 or 7 wins, you take it and run. They're halfway there. But now Rickie Collins has to prove himself out to be the quarterback, as another comment here from our Syracuse Sports Insiders notes from Billy H. Now is the time for us to see if the quarterback competition was as close as Fran Brown said it was over the summer. That's exactly right. Now we get to truly see just how close that competition was. We've gotten a little taste of Rickie Collins against Colgate and against Clemson. Remember, he didn't start and did not play in the spring game because he hurt his thumb and was ineligible to play. So that brings us to another question. Who now is QB2 for this team? You go back to the Colgate game when Collins steps in, gets his time for Angeli to come back in for Collins in that game, you'll recall. And Rickie eventually recovered from that bad opening drive to start out, which people were really worried about. But at one point, Rickie gets tackled, his helmet comes off. So when that happens in college football, of course, you're required to run off the field. And in comes young Luke Carney from Texas, who was a 4-time state champion in Texas, the only quarterback in that state that's ever won 4 consecutive state titles, over 10,000 yards passing, also a ton of yards on the ground, dual threat quarterback. He's one of the faster players on the team. I've heard they clock everything, they grade everything. They've got details on everything these guys do is measured, right, with the analytics we have in sports today. So Carney, I've heard, is one of the 5 or 6 faster players on the team. Comes in against Colgate, runs in from 9 yards out, bing, touchdown, right? That's a lot to put on a freshman's shoulders, though. But the coaches love his maturity. They love what he already has in terms of command of the offense. They certainly love his game experience. Big difference, of course, between high school football and the ACC, but Luke Carney's been around. He's played. He knows it. They love his maturity, everything about him, right? Or Jakhari Williams. Jakhari Williams, who's got a little more experience, still young, but a little more experience than Carney. But it's interesting that Jakhari just has never been able to take command of the backup spot. I've seen Jakhari in practice. He's a talented thrower. He does have some mobility. He's just a quarterback that, for whatever reason, I think some of it is timing. I think he's got to get rid of the ball quicker and just... The problem with Jakhari is he's in a very talented quarterback room with an Angeli, with a Rickie Collins, right? Bigger guy, talented, Elite 11 quarterback, comes in with all the accolades we just mentioned. the background Luke Carney comes in with. Jakhari's just in a talented room and just has not been able to grab anything, has not been able to really grab somebody by the lapels and say, give me that number 2 job. Now he's got a chance to do that. They're going to give him every opportunity, I would imagine, to do that. But it was telling that Carney was QB3 and had worked his way into QB3. So now you have Rickie Collins move up to the starter. No matter who the backup quarterback is now, there's not a lot of experience there. So you're riding on talent, who's winning in practice, who's winning in the room, who knows the offense, and who just gives you the best opportunity to run Jeff Nixon's offense full tilt if they have to come in. So we'll ask Fran Brown about that this week, and we'll see what the players and coaches say about it this week. But I think Luke Carney's got an edge there to be the backup quarterback, even as a freshman, which brings up a question, and you can ride it out maybe and hope that you don't have to see Luke Carney in a lot of situations. But was he planning on redshirting? Because now, remember, you can still play in 4 games and still redshirt. Does that change that plan? Because he's got to serve as the backup quarterback, or do you insert Jakhari Williams in there as the backup and still let Luke Carney redshirt if he wishes to? So that's an interesting question, but rest assured, guys, Carney has impressed the coaches. He has been tearing it up at practice when he's had the opportunity, had a great camp, and it's just reps. It's just getting the reps, getting the knowledge, and just getting every opportunity as a freshman to show your team what you can do. But we mentioned his athleticism, and he's really made an impact right away. He's from near the same area of Big Byron, Washington, Syracuse's big offense, who's actually lost about 50 pounds, by the way. I think he won't clarify exactly what his weight is, but he's listed at 400 pounds. He's lost about 50 pounds. He told me that after the Colgate game. So Byron's somewhere in between 360 and 400 at this point. Steps in as a freshman on that offensive line. So him and Luke Carney have a nice connection there, being from the same area. And Syracuse is not afraid to play freshmen. Demetrius Samuel Jr., an example of that, right? And some of the younger players, Antoine Delorier, made a huge play in the Clemson game, popping the ball loose. Had some great stops in the UConn game in overtime. He has made an instant impact, right? So what do you say? You can't put a freshman in as QB2 if you have to go down that road. Well, I think Fran Brown and this coaching staff have demonstrated we're putting the best players on the field. I don't care what year they're in. So that would tell me Carney's got an edge to be the backup, but we'll see if Jakhari Williams gets the benefit of the doubt, just having been around just a little bit longer than Luke Carney. So how this all plays out is going to be fascinating. Rickie, as we mentioned, has every opportunity to step in. It's his team now. The dust is settled. We know Angeli's out. There is no threat for Rickie Collins to look on the sideline and have to be replaced again, right? It was not a situation where Angeli lost the job and Rickie has it temporarily, but Angeli could come back in and take it like he did in the Colgate game. When Rickie's in for a series, Fran Brown pulls him out, tells him to kind of get it together, but eventually gets out there and looked a lot better after that. It's Rickie's job. So we're back to the future here, because it was his job out of the spring. But they were honest with him in the spring, saying, look, we need another quarterback. We're going to bring in somebody to compete with you. Angeli came in, competed with Rickie Collins, won the job. But all the cliches were in place. You're one play away. Fran Brown, Nixon, Nunzio, all of them, the past couple of months, at every opportunity when asked, have said that they have faith in Rickie. The quarterback competition was close, and he can step in and run this offense if he needed to. Well, we're here. We are at that moment because Angeli's out, and it's Rickie's team now. So all the confidence that was instilled in the spring and everything that they've done up to this point, keeping Rickie involved. Now, Angeli's going to get the bulk of the reps, but Rickie, for all intents and purposes, was a 1A to Steve's 1, and you have to keep him in the loop. You've got to give him some reps with the ones and make him feel like he's the starting quarterback for when the moment arrives that he takes over as the starting quarterback. And guess what? We're here. It's Rickie's team now. So that's football, guys. That's why you invest in a quarterback in the portal, and just you hear it all the time from coaches, one play away and all those cliches. It's a shame. It really is, because Angeli was pumping out what could have been another, I don't know if he would break Kyle McCord's records, but he was on pace to have huge numbers and leading the country in passing and just seemed to take command of that offense, was getting comfortable, was, delivering that ball to, you could see the connection forming with his receivers. Steve had talked in the past few weeks about making an effort to make a personal connection with a lot of the receivers and guys not just on the offense, but on the whole team, right? That's what a leader does. And those are things that Rickie was doing too. Rickie was saying after the game how devastated he was. He and Steve are very close. They watch a lot of film together. And that's an interesting dynamic. Sometimes the QB1 and the backup, they want, the backup wants to be QB1. So sometimes that dynamic can get a little tense. Not the case between Steve Angeli and Rickie Collins. Rickie embraced the backup role and has been preparing for this, right? So now he's just got to come in and embrace it. He's not coming in cold. He's got a little bit of experience, not a ton, but enough. Now he's got a full week. He knows it's his team. Duke, I think, is Duke's good. I'm not brushing them aside by any stretch of the imagination, but they do have I'll say a vulnerable pass defense. There's opportunity there, right? Now, here's the thing, though. Ideally, you'd say, well, I don't want Rickie Collins coming in against a defense like Clemson. And then look what Syracuse did to them, right? Syracuse went in and beat Clemson in all three phases of the game, pushed them around in the trenches, right? This is why you play the games. The biggest question marks I had about that Clemson game were the offensive line and what the defense could do. And they went in and proved that not only did they belong on the field with Clemson, they're the better team than Clemson. I wrote a column about this today. I mentioned it on the postgame pod. You can call Syracuse's win over Clemson a lot of things. Don't call it an upset, because it wasn't an upset. Who was the better team on the field yesterday? Cade Klubnik. Did you see his comments, by the way, the Clemson quarterback? You want to talk about a sore loser. And some of the things he was saying about Syracuse was faking injuries. And, well, he was talking about when Clemson was in their fast-paced offense and Syracuse was doing things to slow the game. Bro, you went into the fourth quarter down by 20 points. Like, what are we talking about here? That defense flushed you out of the pocket. They only had one sack on the day, but constant pressure from the blitzing, right? That defense got in your face. Nobody was faking injuries in that case. You just got beat. Man, Clemson is a mess right now, but we'll let them deal with that. So, on paper, you say this is a good opportunity for Rickie Collins, but look, Duke's not going to feel bad for Syracuse. They're going to come in and try and exploit the young quarterback and exploit some of the issues that he has that he's got to overcome, one being that turnovers were an issue, right? All those questions will be answered on Saturday at the Dome. It's a kickoff. A reminder, we'll have our Syracuse football postgame show live after that game, a couple of episodes of Syracuse Sports coming up during the week, which will preview Syracuse and Duke, amongst other things. And our coverage will continue all week long, of course, not only on syracuse.com, but on the Syracuse Sports Insider text line as well. We'd love for you to sign up today to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. All you have to do is hit that link on your screen. You can see it if you're watching on YouTube. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. Sign up. It's just $3.99 a month, but you can try it free for 2 weeks. Check it out. And being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get direct text message access to me anytime. Your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your opinions, the things you want us to ask players and coaches, just want to shoot the breeze, talk SU Sports. That's what the Syracuse Sports Insider text line is for. And only our Syracuse Sports Insiders get their questions answered and their voice heard on the pod. We highlighted a couple of comments. Let's go to a couple more here from Seth B., who says, I'm feeling bad for Angeli. Hell of a long and hard rehab ahead of him. I get a positive vibe, though, from Collins, and I think he will excel. From Mikey P., who says, I wonder if Carney could see some action this season to utilize his running capability, another weapon out there that teams may not be prepared to defend against. Michael Antonio asked that question earlier. Do we think Rickie is ready to do what Angeli can do? Jack W. says, a full tear is generally 6 to 12 months recovery. Will he even be ready for the start of next season? Talking about Angeli, he probably becomes QB2 or even QB3 just to let him ease back into it. Gabe says, can Syracuse still get to 6 wins with Collins? He thinks they've got a good chance to beat a team like Duke this week, North Carolina, and Boston College all at the Dome. That's one combination, right? Take care of business at home, you're in a bowl game. You're going to have to win road game, I think, at some point to balance the scales there. SMU lost yesterday to who'd they lose to? It was TCU, so maybe they don't look as intimidating as you would think. Miami's going to be a tough ask on the road. Notre Dame's going to be a tough ask on the road, but that's a good formula right there, Gabe. Can Rickie Collins win you 3 games at home and get you to 6 wins in a bowl game? I think he can, given everything we talked about earlier and the situation he's coming into. And Frankie F. says this isn't the same as if we had lost McCord last year. We know that Rickie can come in and do the job. You have to assume the offense is going to look a little different, though. We'll start to get the answers to those questions as we go through the week, and we'll start to get the answer to that question firmly next Saturday at the Dome when the Orange takes on Duke. All right. I'll get out of your hair, let you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday here, but thanks for hopping on with us live here as we reacted to the news that Steve Angeli, we now know, is out for the season, torn Achilles, as reported by Pete Thamel of ESPN after receiving an MRI today to examine the injury suffered at Clemson yesterday. Just a reminder to please subscribe to Syracuse Sports on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So when a live episode like this or a new episode of Syracuse Sports pops up, you will get it and you can listen on demand when you want. And our Syracuse football postgame shows as well. Next one coming Saturday night after the Orange take on Duke at the Dome. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been a live edition of Syracuse Sports presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. We'll catch you again next time here on Syracuse Sports.